Professor Feldman, let me begin by stating the obvious. It is not hearsay when the President tells the President of Ukraine to investigate his political adversary, is it?
It is not.
It is not hearsay when the President then confesses on national television to doing that, is it?
It is not.
It is not hearsay when administration officials testify that they hear the President say he only cares about the investigations of his political opponent, is it?
No, that is not hearsay.
And there's lots of other direct evidence in this 300-page report from the Intelligence Committee, so let's dispense with that claim by my Republican colleagues. Professor Garrity, Professor Turley, notwithstanding what he said today, wrote on August 1st, 2014, in a piece called 5 Myths About Impeachment. One of the myths he was rejecting was that impeachment required a criminal offense. And he wrote, and I quote, "An offense does not have to be indictable. Serious misconduct or a violation of public trust is enough," end quote. Was Professor Turley right when he wrote that back in 2014?
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay. Now, next I'm going to move to Professor Carlin. At the Constitutional Convention, Elbridge Gerry said, and I quote, "Foreign powers will intermeddle in our affairs and spare no expense to influence them." And in response, James Madison said that impeachment was needed because otherwise a president, and I quote, "might betray his trust to a foreign power." Professor Carlin, can you elaborate on why the framers were so concerned about foreign interference, how they accounted for these concerns, and how that relates to the facts before this committee?
So the reason that the framers were concerned about foreign interference, I think, is slightly different than the reason we are. They were concerned about it because we were such a weak country in 1789. We were small, we were poor, we didn't have an established navy, we didn't have an established army. Today the concern is a little different, which is that it will interfere with us making the decisions that are best for us as Americans.
Thank you, Professor. There are 3 known instances of the President publicly asking a foreign country to interfere in our elections. First, in 2016, the President publicly hoped that Russia would hack into the email of a political opponent, which they subsequently did. Second, based on the President's own summary of his call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, we know he asked Ukraine to announce an investigation of his chief political rival and used aid appropriated by Congress as leverage in his efforts to achieve this. And third, the President then publicly urged China to begin its own investigation. Professor Feldman, how would it impact our democracy if it became standard practice for the President of the United States to ask a foreign government to interfere in our elections?
It would be a disaster for the functioning of our democracy if our presidents regularly, as this president has done, asked foreign governments to interfere in our electoral process.
I'd like to end with a powerful warning from George Washington, who told Americans in his farewell address, and I quote, "to be constantly awake, since history and experience prove that foreign influence is one of the most baneful foes of Republican government," end quote. The conduct at issue here is egregious and warrants a commensurate response. The President has openly and repeatedly solicited foreign interference in our elections. Of that, there is no doubt. This matters because inviting foreign meddling into our elections robs the American people of their sacred right to elect their own political leaders. Americans all across this country wait in long lines to exercise their right to vote and to choose their own leaders. This right does not belong to foreign governments. We fought and won a revolution over this. Free and fair elections are what separate us from authoritarians all over the world. As public servants and members of the House, we would be negligent in our duties under the Constitution if we let this blatant abuse of power go unchecked. We've heard a lot about hating this president. It's not about hating this president. It's about our love of country. It's about honoring the oath that we took to protect and defend the Constitution of this great country. And so my final question is to Professor Feldman and to Professor Carlin. In the face of this evidence, what are the consequences if this committee and this Congress refuses to muster the courage to respond to this gross abuse of power that undermined the national security of the United States, that undermined the integrity of our elections, and that undermined the confidence that we have to have in the President to not abuse the power of his office?
If this committee and this House fail to act, then you're sending a message to this President and to future presidents that it's no longer a problem if they abuse their power, it's no longer a problem if they invite other countries to interfere in our elections, and it's no longer a problem if they put the interests of other countries ahead of ours.
Professor Carlin?
I agree with Professor Feldman, and I should say just one thing, and I apologize for getting a little overheated a moment ago, but I have a constitutional right under the First Amendment to give money to candidates. At the same time, we have a constitutional duty to keep foreigners from spending money in our elections, and those two things are two sides of the same coin.
Thank you, and with that, I yield back.